Welcome back to another episode of Mind Something, and thanks for joining us. I've got a couple of extra guests here with me today. As you know, Matt or IotaPie is typically here with us every week. We've got Tactical joining us again, and we have a new guest. Please welcome Chris from Crypto Mining Magazine. Chris, how's it going, buddy?
Hey guys, thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate the invite. Decided to join in with you guys today and see what we all can learn.
Now, Chris, I have just discovered you on Twitter, or maybe you discovered me. I'm not sure, but man, I'm really excited to see some of the stuff that you're going to be bringing. It looks like you cover just about everything that we talk about in this space. But I'm just curious, man. Tell us how you got started in this, and what was your aha moment for crypto?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so the magazine idea is something I've kind of thought about for a couple of years now. I helped launch a magazine in a different industry I was in, and I've got the same questions. I think Matt even Matt even sent a note online on X about why a magazine. Nobody wants what they get in the mailbox anymore. It's all junk mail, right? Yeah. And I get it, but at the same time, I mean, I do a lot of traveling. I'm on airplanes a lot. A lot of times, Wi-Fi doesn't work, so I always have something in there to read, something to glance at. I'm not much of a book reader, so having something that interests me is nice. So yeah, I mean, something I've wanted to get into for some time, but just really haven't decided. Why not now? Just sold business, so it's
Well, man, the first
full
thing
steam.
that came to my mind when I thought of a magazine was the airplane scenario. I'm like, sometimes you're on a plane where you don't want to pay for the Wi-Fi. Sometimes they don't
Oh yeah.
have it at all, and Sky Mall magazine is absolutely trash. I would love to have a crypto mining magazine in those instances.
Yeah, 100%. And that's I want it to be something that people enjoy to read. And I know the internet's there and everybody's got the videos and you can find up to date news on X and everything like that. But I really want to dive into kind of the people and their stories behind it. I mean, yeah, a lot of people got into it for profits, but a lot of people got into crypto for different reasons, and there's a real community behind it. That's kind of what I want to dive into. Is why are why are people willing to give up their most valuable asset, which is to me their time, to continue to work on rigs, continue to develop projects, whether it's a new coin or a new something to solve a real world problem, or a massive mining farm that's they're making profits, and diving in people behind the projects is what I want to get into.
So,
Yeah, I can totally see where having like in-depth, real interviews with people can be very valuable.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think everybody's got a story out there. They're all unique. I mean, everybody goes to that generic, oh, well, I started on a gaming computer and then it kind of went from their story, you know what I mean? But really, what keeps you going? I mean, listening to Panda's live stream a few minutes ago, his whole intro video there, I thought was pretty good. It's like, why do we still do it? Why is everybody still hanging on? And at the end of the day, it's something that people, we're passionate about. It's something that we see a future for, and that is it going to change? Yeah, absolutely. Hasn't been expected to
your mic's breaking up a little bit. Anybody else catch that?
Yeah, it looks like it's threshold clipping.
Okay.
Needs to probably get closer or increase sensitivity a bit.
So I
Test
got a
that.
question for you, Chris. The title of Red Panda Mining video today was GPU mining is dead. Um, and I'm curious, you probably look at all aspects of crypto mining, but in regards to GPU mining, um, do you see that, we're kind of on the downhill slope of this, and where do you think it's going from here?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not in the Ethereum days. We all see that. I think GPUs are going to serve a purpose. I'm excited about some of the new projects coming out. I've listened to and kind of followed a lot of what Quai's doing. I think they're really building a community behind them, and I think that's really what's going to help GPU mining as a whole is, building that conviction behind a project. Why do people want to focus on it? Why do they want to put their time, effort, and electricity costs towards it? So I think, we need more projects like that. You see, AI, compute, going to be a lot of different uses for GPUs. I agree with what Pam said. To me, I've sold a lot of them, but I haven't sold all of them. So I do still think there's going to be a use for them in the future, but I have to sit back and wait and be armed and ready to fire when we do see a recovery.
That's interesting. We've had Dr. K on the last time we had a live stream. He hung out with us the entire live stream, which was like 2 hours, 3. And then the time before that, we had Alpha quite full. So yeah, I think Mindsum here is really doing his part to promote that platform.
Yeah, and they're doing a great job. I mean, you can't miss them in the space right now. So, and I think that's what we need, to bring the the miners back to GPUs. So, yeah, I'm really stoked about what they're doing over there.
There's not many projects that are as passionate about the ethos as they are. Everybody claims those things, right? But when it comes to putting feet on the ground and staying involved in the community, you see a variety of things, right? You have some founders and some devs that are vocal in the sense that they might voice their opinion from time to time, but as far as being visually available, doxing themselves, there's not a whole lot of that, right? So that part of it is kind of refreshing. And I don't know, when it comes to tokenomics and pre-mines and stuff like that, like I have questions about lots of different projects, and I don't know where everybody's true intentions are. I can only go off of what they're telling me and what I see in their community, but I try to do my part in rooting for these guys, because if we don't, who's going to? And where does that leave this industry if we don't find somebody to champion, I guess.
Hey, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the people in the live stream. We got Max Voltage in there. He has been a constant supporter. Thank you, Max. Really enjoy having you here. We got Son of a Tech is in chat with us. Thank you for dropping in again. Once again, love the support. Thank you. Tom, Pearl Rival. Thank you all for spending your Sunday with us and talking some crypto smack.
Absolutely. Thank you all. So right now we got 23 concurrent viewers. I haven't looked at the likes yet, but just a reminder to hit that like, let other people know that we are streaming. I think Rabbit is streaming right now. We tried to coordinate with him to see if he was going to stream at this time, and he's just kind of playing it by ear. So it looks like he did decide to stream, so maybe once his stream starts to wrap up, we'll get a few more viewers in here. But for the guys that are here now, we appreciate it very much. So we got a lot of topics to cover today, but I really want to kind of leave it open to the audience. If you guys got questions, just leave them there in chat and we will get to them. Of course, if you tag us, we'll see it a lot quicker. But as far as the news things that we want to cover, one thing caught my eye, and that was that Pionex US has listed Conflux, which was kind of surprising to me, because most of these exchanges really don't list proof of work coins very often. Conflux has been around for a while, but to my dismay, they currently don't give you a deposit address. And Conflux is, not exactly a US based coin. That's going to be an Asian coin, but to see it get listed on a US exchange was kind of interesting. They did tell me that they will eventually enable the deposit address. I don't know how long it's going to take, but other than them, I don't know of any US based exchange that has listed Conflux. So you've got to have a VPN to be able to trade that coin. So to me, this is a step in the right direction for Pionex. I don't know if they're going to continue to kind of focus on adding some more GPU mineable coins, but that would be great.
From this angle, what makes it more interesting to me is it's only above 8 gigabyte DAG size, so 8 gigabyte cards are no bueno on that anymore. So that actually seems very interesting to me, because now, we got the 1080s may still have a home. Maybe the 170 HXs that are the 10 gigabyte cards. But I don't. Maybe some of the comp 100s might be able to do it. Uh, but there's definitely a limit on cards that you can put on there.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good thing, because
Right.
the less competition that we have to worry about, perhaps profitability can continue to go in the right direction. And Conflux is one of those that continues to kind of stay at the top of the pack in regards to profitability. It seems like we kind of go back and forth between the Kapow coins and Conflux. So it's been a long time since we've had a coin at the top that was a core coin, right? So Alifium has now switched to ASICs, Caspa. We had some good runs there for a while, but I'm not aware of any coins right now that will go ASIC friendly in the future that are anywhere close to the top of the profitability charts. Is there anything that you guys have noticed that I haven't picked up on yet?
Well, we can talk about what happened on the Alifium the past 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, please share, because I don't think everybody's really aware of what caused the little hiccup. But you, operating an Alifium pool, have a lot more insight. So if you could please share with us what you saw.
So they had a fork where they basically doubled the block rate and roughly halved the block reward. So it didn't change emissions. And keep in mind, this will be important later, that there are actually 16 different chains inside Alifium. So what initially happened was, via BTC, who is the big miner, not pool, it had very large amount of hash rate, and they just didn't want to go through and do the fork, didn't want to really participate, and just said, we're just going to drop out. Well, that caused a lot of forks and orphans and uncles to happen. And then they finally dropped off. You're like, oh, thank God, like we can stop getting all these orphans and uncles going through. And that uncovered, and the team at Alifium, they're on it, right? They're the ones telling us what's happening, right? They said, we have another pool, and it didn't become clear to us until, via BTC dropped off, there's only mining one chain in the 16. So you had difficulty in that one chain be sky high and all the others be low. And, the chain still operated, but it didn't operate as well as it could. And so that other, pool that had 50% of the hash rate had to make a fix. Once they made that fix, things settled down, and now the uncle rate is way more manageable. There aren't anywhere near as many orphans. And so it's been a challenging 2 weeks. Like, there was definitely a while there where, like, the node's not happy, and there was some restarting of the nodes that had to take place. But that's pretty much the gist of it. And like I said, the Alifium team, they're on it. They're telling us what's happening.
Well, do you think that? Well, obviously it should have been prevented from happening, but I mean, should it have been something that was obvious that could happen before they got around to fixing it?
Well, as far as fixing it, yeah, I mean, all the pool that wasn't handing out jobs on all the chains, I mean, that's been a known issue. It's just was hidden because of all the different pools and the other pools that had all the different hash rate. When they became the top pool, top hash rate, then it became substantially more noticeable.
So, Son of a Tech's in chat, and he's, the last stream that he had, this was a big point of contention that these things should be addressed already, especially after the fiasco with Ergo. And I agree. It's kind of surprising that we're still running into these issues. And he just pointed out that this could potentially be an issue for Nexa as well. So something to be on the lookout for specifically with Nexa. But I don't think many people are really paying much attention to Nexa anymore. So it'd be interesting to see how that could affect them if they do have a fork.
Well, the team at Alifium were ready to do another hard fork. They had it all queued up. They're like, look, we just got to wait for the Asian pools to wake up, and we're going to deploy a new node. And then they did some more investigation work behind the scenes. And they're like, oh, wait, we know what's really going on. We've contacted the pool that's the issue. And, they solved it without another hard fork. But, I mean, you got to give them props. They're doing all they can. I mean, they don't own this, right?
Right.
So they did all they could.
And Cedric Crispin is in chat, and he says it's hard to fix problems when you don't have them. So, yeah, you can't really fix something until it happens, right? I suppose. I don't know. I think it depends on the issue. But one thing that bugs me a lot is test nets that last for too short of a time frame, right? So take for instance why they were testnet for, I don't know, it's like 7 years or something ridiculous. I don't remember the time frame, but that gives you a lot of time to figure out issues like this. And sometimes we kind of rush things, and I'm okay with waiting. I think that it's very important to give things a proper amount of time to find exploits and issues. But let's face it, the world we live in, everybody wants it now, and it's hard to have patience for these things, especially when you think you're in the middle of a bull run, which I'm curious, everybody in chat, where do you think we are? Maybe we should put a poll out there. Do you think we are in the bull run just because Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs, but altcoins are still lagging behind, or do you think this time is different?
So Son of a Tech just asked, can they not force enabling all chains on the mining enabled node? And the thing is the mining pool chooses how to hand out which job on which chain. And that's how that one pool got away with it. They just looked at chain 0 and they're like, yep, we're going to subscribe to chain 0. We're going to hand out the to all their miners. And now for Viper, I don't know how anyone else does it. I know some other pools, they just randomly do it, randomly hand it out. Viper does it a little differently. We tend to look at the difficulty on all the streams, all different chains, and try our best to hand out the one that has the most difficulty, so we can potentially hit more blocks.
Well, I don't want to change subjects too quickly, but there was a question that I saw in chat that is currently on the agenda. And Matt, since we have you here, you probably are most qualified to answer this question in detail. He wants to know, or Matthew wants to know, is it possible to profit switch between distributed GPU cloud platforms, sort of like NiceHash for GPU workloads? So I've been looking at basically dual booting operating systems, right? So I want one SSD that, let's say I go with like a 2 terabyte SSD and partition it, half of it's running Linux, the other half running Windows. I can jump between Solid to Octa or Clore or Vast, but there's an issue with that. Number one, if you drop one platform for another, your uptime is going to be severely impacted by that. So that's definitely something that you want to consider. The other thing is these things are not easy to do with consumer grade hardware. Billy, what you probably want to do is use server grade hardware for this purpose. But Matt, can you kind of elaborate on what you would do in that instance if you were going to do such a thing?
if I had the time and I really wanted it to be dynamic, I would find a way to run everything off of Pixie Boot. So you would just, and then remote load over your network the file system with NFS. So you can just reboot it and just set in a config which OS you want to come up. I don't know how that would work with Windows because it's not really um, how I would set things up for Windows. I'm definitely not an admin for Windows Network, but there was a time there when I had almost Pixie booted, and I would just run everything on Rail. I mean, I literally had like 20 or 30 rigs all Pixie booted, iOS.
Your mic is cutting in and out, by the way. I don't know if anybody else is hearing that.
Yeah, a little bit here and there might be sense to the issue.
Turn it down. But yeah, I would Pixie boot
Okay.
the different windows.
Is that, what is BMC exactly, and why is it on server hardware as opposed to not being on consumer hardware?
Tactically, you want to cover that one?
Yeah. So once again, I am not a system. I guess you would call it a server or server engineer. But basically, the general concepts that I could cover for that as a standpoint, I believe the technical term is out of band management. Basically, the idea is that you can manage that system. It goes by a bunch of different names. IPMI. I actually looked up that acronym because I don't actually recall what it means itself. But there's BMC essentially is a baseband management controller. Essentially, it's a basically like almost like a Raspberry Pi or like a secondary computer that's built in that interfaces, at least with Supermicro, it's over PCIe. I don't know if there's other formats that behave differently. I know there are open source projects that you can essentially just you run cables out of the back, like it sits in a PCI slot and then plugs into your um, ports in the back, say VGA, HDMI, USB ports. Um, Basically, in essence, the idea is that you can interface with that system without having to have any sort of remote software or something like that on it. It's got some benefits as far as, say, security or completely different networks. Like one of the things I find particularly interesting, especially with the gravitation of a lot of server hardware over to, say, AI platforms and the security concerns about people getting out and poking around in your network, is you can have IPMI set up where, or BMC, the same difference, where you can have that on a completely different, like physically isolated network, not even talking VLANs like that, completely separate, like electrically connected network that you can use to manage these things because it gives you full remote control of that machine. It's just like you walking over to that machine, plugging in a mouse and keyboard and a monitor and controlling it that way. And that level of control over a system is nice to have segregated on a completely different network. You also get a bunch of other information that you won't normally get, and that sort of depends or varies on platforms or how well it's fleshed out. But you can get stats, you can remotely power on, manage the system, you can see um, system information, you can power specs, you can see energy consumption over time, the health and status of one or multiple power supplies, and you can even perform I guess you could say BIOS recoveries. You can flash it directly from there. You can talk to that BMC controller over a network and recover systems. It really has a huge amount of utilitarian purpose, and I would love to see it on more consumer things, but realistically, aside from our specific case or enterprise, it would really serve no purpose for the general community, which is sad, but it would be lovely to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and considering what we're all doing now, maybe tools like that are being created by a community member, and That would be pretty cool to see. I'd love to see something like that. Before I was aware of some of these things existing with all this consumer grade hardware that I have, I was looking at, you know, the poor man's way of just like, okay, what if I get like a USB hub and I plug all these different computers in and then I have a monitor and then I can
Hmm.
remotely manage all of these different devices
Yes.
on a consumer level, but it's
Yes.
complicated. And then we go back to the question of, well, do you really want to hurt your reliability score on one platform just so that you can switch over to another? And I think that may
Yes.
be the biggest issue or hurdle that people would face if they wanted to do something like that.
That is something that I did want to add. Well, two things actually. Max mentioned that you can get into your BIOS with IPMI. That's 100% one of the most useful features for that. Whether you're dealing with, say, well, consumer or well, Epics or any server grade hardware, is being able to jump into IPMI and change your configure settings, tweaking stuff. All of my tuning that I've done on all the Epic systems I have, it's all been over IPMI. I rarely will walk over and plug in a monitor unless there's something seriously wrong or IPMI is not working properly. The thing that you mentioned, though, is uh, say plugging something in and controlling multiple consumer systems. There are network controlled KVMs. Um, Once again, the description of the acronym escapes me, but basically you would have essentially a box that you would connect multiple sets of some sort of display input and say USB, or the older ones would have been PS2 for the old heads out there. But basically you would have a network connection to that KVM, and the KVM then would be able to switch back and forth between multiple consumer systems and control those remotely as well. So there's a another way to do that. Usually KVMs are pretty expensive, especially ones that have those kind of features. If they're just basic ones that are just switching inputs, you can generally have those that are pretty cheap. But that uh, kind of gets away from the idea of being able to remotely access these systems and manage them or deal with issues.
And Cedric says IPMI is not safe. It has several security issues, and since it's at BIOS level, that could be pretty nasty. Um,
Yes, yeah.
So Matthew also asked, what prevents a single OS from having competing platform clients running simultaneously? Because it's likely that there won't be two jobs being delivered by different platforms at the same time. Well, that actually is very likely. You would hope that all the platforms are busy enough that you're constantly being rented. But if you could also potentially schedule maintenance, but you don't know when you're going to get a job. So that's going to be an issue. I think what could potentially fix this, though, Matthew, is one platform being able to arbitrage all of the other platforms. And that's something that I've been in talks with multiple platforms about. I think it's something that they all want to integrate. They're commingling, right? They're having discussions with one another and they're figuring out, okay, we have very high demand and not enough hardware to meet that demand. Where can we pull resources from to help us meet those demands when the time arises? The problem is you've got one platform that you set your own prices on, and another platform these are stagnant pricing. Um, so it's hard for them to combine all of these things and work with one another and make sure that they still have a margin. That may be the biggest hurdle is the margin, right? You got one platform that they want to make 20%, another platform that's okay with making 5%. And figuring out all of those little, intricacies is a challenge, let alone, all of the software and the programming aspects of making these things intertwine with one another. But I do think it's coming. It'll be interesting to see which one does it first. So, I
So I
want.
wanted to put a topper on the IPMI and PMC. Basically, when you have a server, like we have servers for Viper and colocation, your only way to get out of jail, because you don't want to pay someone for hands-on, is that, and there are actually some, I forget the name of it, I can look it up, some open source software that fronts the IPMI web interface for like your Dell or your HP Lila. But when you've got something that is in co-location, you don't get to touch it, or you got to spend a lot of money having someone there to touch it for you. And that is, they basically give you a login and type your remote IP address for a restricted amount of time, and it's all over. But yeah, when you've got stuff in co-location, you're not
Mm-hmm.
BMC, I you know,
Hey, Chris, are you still with us by chance? I think I lost him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just wanted to bring you back
Okay.
into the discussion here, and I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you kind of wanted to get to the stories of all of these people that are involved. And I'm curious, are you more focused on one specific aspect of the crypto mining in terms of CPU versus GPU or ASIC, or would you like to interview people that have massive farms? Like what do you want to focus on initially?
Honestly, I want to do a little bit of all of it. I want to touch on anything from CPUs to your massive industrial publicly traded farms. I think the space is it's so vast. I want to cover a little bit of everything, and in each print issue, that's kind of where we want to go. We want to have 3 to 4 editorials. One touching on the home miner, and going all the way up to the big industrial miners, and just kind of encompassing a little bit of everything.
Right on. Are you in talks with anybody right now? Like, are you lining things up for the first publication?
Yeah, yeah. So first publication is planned to launch in September. We are going to do it bi-monthly, so it'll be a September, October issue. Yeah, we got pretty full on the first one, surprisingly. So excited about that, and go ahead and lining up for November, December right now. So yeah, anybody that's on that wants to chat or do an interview, happy to get on, talk, promote a brand. If you guys are, launching a project that's, you want some exposure. So, feel free to DM me. I'm pretty active on X. I need to get better on a lot of the other platforms, obviously, but we're still kind of new and growing that audience. So we'll get to it as we can. But yeah, I mean, shoot me a DM. I'd love to chat with you.
Have you by chance talked to Django?
I have not. I've watched a lot of his stuff, followed him for quite some time, but I have not actually talked to him. I need to reach out. I've got a whole list I need to get on, but it's been all hands on deck trying to get ready for this first issue. To be honest with you.
Okay. I'm really curious about his backstory. I mean, he shares some of the information with us, but one thing that has just kind of blown my mind was that initial facility that he got, where it's like he gets free power just for paying rent. And in my mind, I'm like, what landlord in their right mind would allow that to happen? Did the landlord know in advance what he was planning on doing? And how did it all fall apart? I'm just really curious about that story. So if you ever get details on that, please share it with me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'll reach out to him. Yeah, yeah. No, you're 100% right. I mean, he's got definitely some interesting concepts on how he goes about things. So he would be a great one.
Right on. So
hey
do
Jay,
you? Go
you
ahead.
want to talk about the new mining board?
The new mining board?
Minis?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's on the agenda for sure. There's actually something very specific that I wanted to share, and that is an undervolting strategy for that particular board. But before we get to that, and I'll leave that in our Discord channel so that all of you guys can have that. But essentially, you're just going through the BIOS, all the settings that you want to change on that board to try and get as efficient as possible. I personally haven't gone all the way through that little guide yet. That was shared, I think. Keaton was the one who put this together, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Keaton, most of you should be, but he's essentially the main guy that most of us deal with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to Hive OS. And yeah, he's a super sharp guy, so he's probably got some great settings in there. I've seen some people playing with it, and we're getting even better efficiency out of that board, or we'll say that particular chip, which is the 7945HX, or the laptop version of the 7950X, and I don't know if changing it to all of those settings is going to create problems if you're using it on a rental platform. And maybe we could all kind of speculate here as to whether or not that could cause some trouble. I mean, obviously we're tuning it mostly for random X, but the big question is, if you get in there and you start changing all of that stuff, is that potentially going to cause reboot issues or crashes if you're renting it on an AI platform? What do you guys think?
Hey, real quick before we jump into that, we need to crank Matt up a little bit just to get everyone online as far as levels go.
Okay. I think I can do that on an individual level. Bear with me just a second here. All right, Matt, say something.
Okay, I was trying not to blow out the microphone earlier. Now I'm not loud. Okay. Hard to find some.
I've got you at like 150%. Everybody else is at 100%. It didn't seem to make a difference in my headphones, so I don't know if that fixed it or not. But
I might use the wrong terms previously. Like you weren't clipping like into the red. It was cutting out. I think like a sensitivity threshold thing.
Yeah. So, by the way, Jake, why should we care about this board? What makes this board so special?
well, the efficiency is probably the most important thing. There's a lot of other options out there as far as cost effectiveness goes. I mean, if we talk about density, obviously going with an EPYC board is going to be probably the best bang for the buck when it comes to CPU mining. And maybe even for AI, especially if you're going to do more than one GPU in a rig. But if you can catch that thing when it's on sale, it's a hell of a deal. And we talked about this last stream, but I picked one up for I think $220. It was like $245 after tax. So you're getting the most efficient version of a 7950X that you can get, and you're getting AM5 platform, DDR5. Now the memory is expensive, and we've run into this, and we should probably talk about that. It has to have laptop memory. So not only is DDR5 expensive, but when you have to go with SODIMM, your options get very limited. So you're not going to find RAM for this card or RAM for this board used very often. So you're pretty much going to be buying new all the time. So, you know, even if you can find that board for $250, $300, you still got some cost in there that's going to make it, you know, comparable to the best deal that you're going to find on an EPYC platform. But, you know, for a single GPU board, if you're trying to use this as a dual purpose machine, it's a great option in my opinion. Is there something specific that you were implying there that I missed?
I was just trying to give everyone a chance to catch up to where we all were. I literally have two of these still in this shipping container.
Oh.
Yeah, I've just been so busy.
I haven't even opened it yet.
I know, it's crazy.
Okay, so I gotta take point then.
Find us the deals on the RAM.
Okay, so here's what I did recently. I was buying the Crucial Kit 64 gigabyte on Amazon, and the first time I bought it, it was $140. The second time I bought it, it was $130, and I'm like, sweet, things are going in the right direction here. And then the next time I looked at it, it was $179. This was the day before Amazon Prime Day. And ever since then, I cannot find a deal on it. However, if you buy the 128 gig kit, it's going to come with 2 sticks of 64 gigs. And you can buy that for basically $140 for each 64 gigabyte. So that's what I did. It was kind of a toss-up for me. I considered going with the 48 gig stick, and it was only like $100. So that saves you $80. But when you're looking at all these different platforms, everybody's going to be sorting by either 32 gigs or 64 gigs. Nobody's looking for that middle ground there. So you're not going to get extra jobs that you wouldn't get if you had 32 gigs, in my opinion. So that's why I decided to just go ahead and just jump it up to the 128 gig kit. I get two 64 sticks, one for each of the new boards that I just got. And I wish I could find a better deal for you guys, but that's where I'm at right now with it.
Yeah.
Mike's still cutting out, brother.
Okay, no, completely lost him. Am I still there? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can still hear you, Tactical.
Okay. Hey, now we're talking Mad Electron. I would love to have 1 terabyte of RAM.
You've got a few of these boards, don't you, Tactical?
I do, yeah. I have. I've got 4 so far. One of the BD790i, the Mini ITX, and 3 of the BD795Ms, which are the micro ATX boards.
Okay, and what are you using them for? Are you only CPU mining on them, or are you throwing them on a couple different platforms?
So the end game, I think, for these is that they're going to be, at least while, say, platforms like Nosana are taking advantage or only allowing a single GPU, they're excellent platforms for that. But really, I think one of the things that you not necessarily struggle with, but that has been on everyone's mind with Ryzen 7000 series really bringing AVX 512 to the masses is these projects that actually take advantage of it. And Factorn was a great example of something where that was a big deal, and lately Cubic has been a great example of that as well. For example, basically a dual EPYC 7742, that's 64 cores per, and just cranked it tuned to the absolute bleeding edge, is basically the equivalent of two 7950Xs or just about two 7945HXs. Those are going to be a little less performant, and that's a dramatic difference in cost. So when you see those situations, well, I mean, naturally everyone hates to lose, but kind of stings a little bit for the older ones in that purpose. So it's kind of hedging my bets on whether or not we see anything come across that is going to use AVX 512, which I think is only going to become more prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And it just being a fantastic value. Like, for example, I was picking up some Gigabyte branded X99 boards, like really decent boards for $70, throwing in a Xeon like a 2697A, B4, which is a 16 core. They cut down cores and then they give it more clock speed, so it's kind of a nice mix, that particular one. Either way, very, very cheap. Really, the most expensive part of that platform is still DDR4 ECC RAM.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a what do you call it? I don't want to use the term future proofing, but essentially a modernization is why I'm grabbing those. I had quite a few AM4 systems, 5950Xs, 3900Xs, got rid of all those. So, yeah, I mean, I think part of the logic that I have is should always be an upgrade cycle, or perhaps rolling upgrades in mind, just to battle against increasing net hash and keep up with the latest systems. So to elaborate on the mining side of things, I've got about 2 mega hash in random X performance, and that amount of hash rate now versus 2 years ago, just from the general folks that I'm seeing in like Rabbit's chat and stuff like that, isn't as impressive as it was 2 years ago. And I'm sure that I'm nowhere near the biggest fish out there. There's dramatically larger folks that I know of. I won't say names or anything like that, but I know some people in particular that have some absolutely just eye-watering amounts of CPUs. But it's that slow-moving train concept where you're going to have to keep up with Joneses per se, or you're going to lose your advantage if you get the drop on new coins. Now, is that relevant in today when sadly proof of work has been languishing? Maybe not so much. So yeah, I guess it's to wrap everything up. The reason why those were picked up is excellent value for performance, and they're able to serve a dynamic purpose between AI platforms as well as mining. Are they ideal for mass deployments like, say, just to bring Max up again with his talk about those 8 GPU systems and just killing it and being basically permanently rented? That is going to be the big downfall. And there's some really fascinating uses for those 795Ms or any of the Minisforum systems with bifurcation, splitting up that single 16x slot, or even converting the M.2s into 4x PCIe slots with risers to get some more, squeeze some more performance out of this thing. But there's going to be a approachable limit on what those things are capable of doing, which is why I'm also playing around with these 100 EPIC motherboards as well. So I'm exploring both avenues to see which ones would be a better option in the long run, whether it is making those multi-GPU AI rigs, or to touch on something else that was mentioned earlier, having some sort of a virtualized situation on one of those machines, and say taking a 64 core CPU, splitting it up 4 ways, splitting up some RAM, and running 4 virtual machines you could then use on, say, a platform like Nasana, where you can only use 1 GPU per instance.
So kind of go
hey,
back real quick to the bifurcation thing, in case we lost anybody on that. Essentially, you can take that X16 slot for the single GPU through bifurcation, then you can run 2 GPUs at X8. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No problem. So, couple things. Jake, maybe you can bring up and share, but the eBay list for that server case that had the SMT, we were talking about this. Like, there's an eBay listing for $6,000 for an 8. What is that? Is it a SXM? Well, whatever. It's
yeah. SXM2.
Thank you. V100, and it's like $6,000. So I'm like, that's a deal. That'll pay off in 300 something days, even less. So I reach out and I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in this. And as you go through the details, it's like, oh, it doesn't even include the GPUs at all. It's just the server case, bare bones, for just that has the 8 socket for 6,000.
That absolutely blew my freaking mind. And you shared the screenshot of his reply from the your eBay account. And I go back to that saying, good things are seldom cheap and cheap things are seldom good. If it looks too good to be true, guys, it usually is. It's so disappointing that he replied with that. Like, what did he say the price tag was if he wanted the GPUs? It was like $79,000.
$98,000.
$98,000. Absolute insanity. And you know what's funny is I got so interested in that because, like you, I'm running the ROI on this, and I'm like, I'd be an idiot not to buy this thing, assuming that the GPUs were in it at the time. But if the platform itself is about to be end of life as far as support is concerned, like, that's why I was like, okay, well, maybe that's why he's selling them so cheap, because NVIDIA is kind of pushing this to the wayside. Drivers for these things are not going to be supported anymore, and how often are people actually going to create new models for these cards, but I was almost willing to take the risk, and then you shared that, and I was like, nope, that's
For those that don't know, these are the plug-in, like socket plug-in.
Yeah, it almost looks like a CPU socket for a GPU.
mhm.
Just slap it in there. They're very interesting. It's what's
Slap
really
it in.
bizarre.
It was 40 gigabytes each. 40 gigabytes each. You could have 8 of them.
It has made me kind of go down the rabbit hole of looking at that SMX2 and seeing what type of PCIe adapters are out there, or whether or not we should just look for
Uh-huh.
server cases that use that, and maybe we can find those cards much cheaper. But then you got to buy the cooler, and there's all kinds of things to consider. But it kind of expanded my horizons to be on the lookout for other things that I may not necessarily have been looking at in the past.
I'm hard pressed to see how over time, like a 9, how would that compare? Granted, these other ones had 40 gigabytes of RAM. You get RAM all the time. If this hasn't taught us anything, always resell consumer GPU, right? I sold it
Mm-hmm.
for 3070 this morning. 295, yay! But you're not going to be able to sell. You're so hard to buy one of these little plug-in V100 GPUs in.
Hey Matt, do you have a set of wired headphones, bro? I think maybe your Bluetooth is giving you some issues here.
Yeah, I switched over to the chose the right mic. Thought it.
It's like it just cuts in and out and getting like every other word. Um, but to go back to the resale value thing, I am kind of curious what I'm going to be looking at in the future when it comes to those BDM 795Ms. A lot of people warn me
Yeah.
in advance, like, hey, you know, you can never change the CPU on this thing. It's not like there's an upgrade path for these. So, you know, what are you going to do when it's no longer relevant? It's not going to be worth anything when you try and sell it. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that that thing still performs so well that if I just show some benchmarks when I try to sell these things, if there's a
Mm-hmm.
good GPU in that thing, people are gonna they they'd be silly not to buy it for a good deal. But I don't know. I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
So I mean, just okay. So I sold 7 3900X and 6 5950X systems when I was liquidating all of my AM4 stuff, and rarely, I think, except for maybe one person, was really had any questions of that sort. Um, I think price, of course, is going to be a factor. As far as our usability, 3900Xs were still really viable. The only thing that killed those was the prevalence of cheap Rome 7002 epics. And when you could get basically a dual 64 core system for basically, well, actually tend to be less than the price of 7 of those systems, or was it efficiency? I forget now. Either way, the math worked out that you were getting I believe it was a more efficient system, taking up less space than those. So just looking at the age of, say, 3900Xs, they're going to be around for a dramatic amount of time. But I don't foresee any particular issues. If you're selling these systems off to normies, I don't think they're going to care. And it's not like you're pulling a fast one on them. How long were we using 4-core systems for? We had a decade of Intel with quad-core systems, and only until AMD, rose from the dead, did we start to see any noticeable improvement. We actually backtracked with laptops. We went from quad-core mobile SKUs down to these U SKUs. We lost cores, and you could go back and pick up a laptop from like 2010, 2012 with like a 3610 QM, whatever the quad-core SKU was, that would outperform newer ones that were 2 cores, 4 threads. it was insanity. So I really don't see it necessarily as an issue. And if you're not, say, spending huge amounts of money to pick these up when they were, say, $500-600 a pop, like for example the BD790i X3D, so that's a mobile SKU version of a 7950X3D. Those are like $600-700, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot harder pill to swallow than picking up basically 3 non-X3D boards for the same price, like the deal you got, Mind Something. That you're so low into your risk, your cost, that it's not really going to be a big deal. I think the biggest problem would be is if you buy the wrong RAM or too small a RAM and you try to resell that later on down the road to recoup your costs. That's probably going to be your pain point. But everything else, I really don't see it as too much of a problem to pick these up and worry about resellability.
I've watched.
Yeah, everything's resellable on this stuff. I mean, we've seen even like the big dual epics. Like I get constantly pinged about getting in contact with weed farmers' old farm, selling that stuff off still, and it's still holding its value.
I watched a video recently of gaming performance between the 7945HX and the 7945HX 3D, and they're pretty much identical. Maybe some slight differences in the 1% lows. And whoever did the test, I think he fell victim to what I watched Blessed Miner do in his recent video with that particular board, and not pulling the little sticker off that's on top of the CPU before you put the cooler on, because he had this massive temperature differences between the two. And the minute difference in gaming performance based on the power fluctuation and the heat fluctuation between those two, I think they would have been neck and neck if he had actually peeled that sticker off before he put the cooler on. I think that might have been his issue. And to me, it's like, why, especially after watching that video, why would anybody spend, $650 for the X3D version of that board for gaming when you can get the same performance out of the 7945HX? It's just crazy. But, people see that X3D and they're like, oh, it's got to be the best.
Sounds like we're getting into the tuning section. I'm excited.
Oh, going back to the tuning of these boards. So, guys, I'm going to leave that little Excel spreadsheet in our Discord server. So if you want access to that and you want to undervolt this thing and try and get the best efficiency, I should probably mention the type of numbers that we were seeing was Cleveland Trash Panda that shared his overclock settings with us. And I think he was dropping almost 25% in power. So it is going to affect hash rate a little bit, but I mean, an extra 25% gain in efficiency, that's pretty massive on top of something that's already probably 25 more efficient than just the non-mobile version of that chip. So.
But every time you try to use AVX 512 on something like that, like the heat and the power just skyrocket. I would love to see how that's doing on a AVX 512 algo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to nut up and grab the power meters and do a shoot off between the 7950X and the 7945HX to get a real accurate reading, like say with those basically eco mode tunes for both of them, like mandatory for the mobile SKUs. They don't have a choice, and get some real good numbers. But just referencing what people are going off of in Discord, say Ida Karn, I believe is probably the way to say his name, or Karne. I have to go back and look at his name again. He's been really say spearheading this and getting a lot of folks excited about it in Rabbit's chat. And he was saying somewhere around, say, 94 to 100 watts for a 7945HX. I do want to get those numbers and, verify myself to see exactly how they run. But if that's what those things are pulling at full tilt and, say, doing around 19 17.5 to 20 kilohash random X, which
Oh,
would
wow.
be using AVX 512, and that's pretty slick.
I thought you were going to
Oh,
say
yeah.
18 kilohash. So we're getting up to the 19, almost 20, huh? Wow.
You can, yeah. The big thing is it's going to be your RAM tunes, and it's going to be risky territory, right? Because if it's not stable and you're using that for AI platforms, you're really going to be shooting yourself in the foot about as hard as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big risky part. If we're talking random X hash rate just as a benchmark, you can get like 18.5 if you use two DIMMs, and that's fine. That's probably the most logical scenario if you're going to be using these for hosting platforms, because you're not messing around with all your secondary and tertiary timings and everything that they do to get absolute maximum bleeding edge performance out of these. But you're going to be something that's rock hard stable. You start messing with tunes, then things can be a little more risky, or you're going to have to take significantly higher care to make sure that your tunes are stable.
I would definitely pick the stability over, let's say a 5% gain. If there's some kind of middle ground in there, I
Yeah.
might go that route.
Realistically, yes. That's why you don't have overclocking options on most server hardware. Their goal is efficiency and consistency. If you have different systems that perform differently and they're clustered or something like that, then things get out of step. That's specifically why epics have multiple modes that you can tune them in, so you can go for a consistent performance across every single system.
Sadie sometimes up in the chat, she's saying, I've had the Minisforum 7945HX 230 hash per watt on XMR at the wall, helping my friend tune his for efficiency at 22 kilohash non-efficient settings. That's impressive.
So I didn't think that there was AVX 512 on RandomX. Has that changed?
I don't know when that did, but whenever you launch it with a 7000 series, it will say that it's using AVX 512 instructions.
Oh, that's for that one small portion, the dash F portion. Okay, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
We spent a lot of time talking about that particular board, and I love it. I hope everybody else is able to get their hands on it at the price that I found them at. I've been checking constantly. I can't seem to find any good deals here recently. Even if you were going to find them used on eBay, they're still going for damn near $400. So, but I think that we're probably going to see some new stuff coming out from Minisforum. That may be why we got such a good deal on them. Maybe they're trying to get through their inventory for some new things. Speaking of which, we might see the Ryzen AI 395 coming out of Minisforum. But I don't think it's going to make any sense as far as affordability is concerned. They're going to want top dollar for that thing, but I'd really like to play with one of those.
Yeah, tuning is going to be a huge concern. Shout out to Crypto Klutz. He picked one up from GMK Tech or something like that, and his initial I guess information on it is it's not going to be that great of a platform. That BIOS was very, very sparse. Now apparently other ones may have better success as far as tuning goes, but that particular one seems like a no-go as far as picking that up for, say, either mining or tuning. Now that's on the CPU side of things. I don't particularly think that that's going to be the new replacement for a 7945HX. Super efficient, small form factor mining system. AMD can get their act together and see some adoption. The unified RAM is going to be the draw for those things, in my opinion.
Speaking of AMD, something that I wanted to get to today was to talk about a chart that I saw showing AMD has now caught up to Intel in sales for server CPUs. And it's been a long time coming, right? I think that the industry wanted to see stability out of AMD. And not only have they seen the stability out of AMD, but they see the writing on the wall with Intel. Pat Gelsinger being let go. And just things are not going the way Intel would like them to go, right? I'm curious what you guys think about this, in the sense that, you know, I don't want to see an American company do poorly. I would like to root for Intel. It's great that they got into the GPU market. They're doing some interesting things there, but is Intel gonna die? Like, are we watching this in real time, where Intel is just going to get murdered by AMD?
Well, when are they going to release something that's better than AMD?
Great question.
I mean, it really comes down to that. Is the only time that AMD even started to overtake Intel was the second gen Ryzen. First gen, definitely not. It was only then where you started to see the shift. So, I mean, they've got a lot of catching up to do.
A lot, and I don't see them building any momentum in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a huge problem for Intel. I mean, AMD really cut them down on the HEDT platforms. Say like your X99, X299, you know, your super enthusiast prosumer stuff, with just having high core counts on regular mainline consumer desktop systems. And they're really bringing the fight to them in the server space. There's a, if I may suggest, I don't know if people, I think there's some controversy regarding Moore's Law is dead, but there's a particular episode of Broken Silicon that I think people should take a look at if they're really curious about this. It's number 271, and he has a server engineer on that's talking about this in detail. Some of the risks, the issues that Intel is facing with their server side languishing in regards to say this loss of what's the word, not market cap, what am I trying to think of, market share? Yeah, market share. But some of the interesting stuff is that you're running into this collusion of an entirely new platform with DDR5 and the needs of a lot of these groups, or deployments, or hyperscalers, is needing a lot of RAM being so important, and DDR5 for server stuff just being ludicrously expensive. And the difference in core count, AMD has very high core count per CPU, and Intel really still cannot compete. I just looked it up recently on their latest platform, the Xeon Scalable 5s. They go up to 64 cores, and as far as, say, performance cores go, not counting E-core systems, Xeons have some weird ones that are like 128 E-cores. Your EPYC platforms will do 96, but that's scaling into DDR5 territories. But they're not on parity as far as that goes.
Yeah, the architecture is just not there.
Yeah,
we're not seeing any innovation in that field, and they've got to do something. And like I said, I don't see any momentum going in the right direction. I don't want to spend too much time talking about AMD versus Intel. I think we all kind of see where that's going. But I do want to talk about something that Backwards Miner just mentioned, the 170HX. So for a lot of really, really smart people, you guys included, we started switching to the 170HXs and the CMP 100 210s when the prices started coming down. And they've continued to come down on those cards. And one thing that I pay attention to, probably more so than anything on a profitability calculator, is the revenue per kilowatt hour. And we talked about this many times, but it's pretty simple to do the math. I don't need to see that, okay, this card makes 27 cents after power. I know what my power rate is. And if I can see the revenue per kilowatt hour, then I know what my profitability is. And what I'm looking for is the equipment that is the most profitable when it comes to kilowatt hour revenue. So having said that, those two particular cards, any of the CMP stuff, is always going to outperform any of the consumer grade hardware. And for that reason, I would like to have more of them, but I don't know if it makes sense to buy them even at these prices if we are all in agreement that GPU mining may have had its heyday. So you guys have them, right? Do you have any concerns that, you know, it won't be, they have a shelf life that you're concerned with?
Well, I mean, I probably have. Well, we all know someone who has way more than Tactical and I, way more, and he has commitment. I mean, he's got a lot of commitment. That being said, I've got 30 or 40 of them, and that's the right amount for me. I have a diverse mining setup. When I need to hit it, I can hit it, and it's good enough. I mean, quite frankly, I have way more CPU power now.
Okay. I'm getting to that point. It is certainly shifting. Tactical, what about you? You're more committed in that department than Matt is. I think you firmly believe that those cards have a longer shelf life, even with GPU mining kind of weighing.
So it's kind of struggling with my which one I think is going to have a longer shelf life. I really like the 100-210s having 16 gigs of RAM, and I think NVIDIA realized that was the problem. The 170HXs are either 8 or 10 gigabytes. Of course, there's a completely different setup with how those dies are stacked, how the HBM works, but regardless, I think the 100-210s are going to have a longer shelf life for that RAM. Using, say, something like Cusco, that inference project is able to use GPUs with a minimum of 16 gigabytes of RAM. So you might see a little bit of a longer shelf life with those. But yeah, there's definitely concerns about being able to pivot, say, to AI or any other projects that aren't purely mining, since these cards have basically been kneecapped about as hard as they can to keep them far away from being a data center GPU, which is their origins.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's probably about the closest that I would venture into, say, ASICs or any purpose-built device, solely to mitigate the risk of being stuck with hardware that can't do anything.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's the only thing that's really kept me from pulling the trigger is it's a one-trick pony. Granted, there are lots of different GPU coins to mine, so in that sense, it's not a one-trick pony. But
yeah,
I do like being able to, I don't know how to put this. I'd rather have the option than the obligation, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, there's always going to be arguments either way, for why or when you can do it, and then you're going to balance that factor with price. With them being ridiculously cheap, they're hard to pass up. Same thing that happened with the BC250. Just the ludicrous amount of hash rate and performance out of those that was great for the time and price. And now I would imagine pretty much everyone who owns one has them off.
Yeah, it's funny. I try to balance my perspective in the things that I say I would do on in the sense that I have to look at this from the audience perspective, right? Most everybody watching this has probably got pretty cheap power, but most people probably don't have the power rate that I have after solar. And so, if you're looking at a profitability calculator and you see at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, you're making 17 cents per kilowatt hour in revenue. So for every kilowatt, you've got 7 cents in profit versus looking at, say, a 3090 that makes 8 cents per kilowatt hour. They make a lot of sense as long as GPU mining continues to do well. But like for somebody like me, I should have bought hundreds of these things because my power is damn near free, and so the longevity would last quite a bit longer for me. But like I said, I try to tailor these discussions based on what an average person's situation looks like.
Yeah, and that's the hard part of those arguments. I had basically the same, well, multiple times arguments with folks about cheap Xeons versus buying into, Ryzens or Epics. They're ludicrously cheap. The concern is how long they will be useful for. So and of course, say not everyone's able to drop like I don't know. I think I spent like 40 grand on Epics or something insane.
Damn.
Just looking at like the total setup, not trying to flex or anything, but when you talk to folks, you have to understand, like you're saying, 100% from their perspective. Not everyone's going to be able to uh, work an extra 6 months worth of overtime, get money from funding, or do whatever they did to afford buying these systems, which, an individual one's like 2 grand. That's that's a dramatic amount of money. And same with buying 5090s for that matter.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. We got a few other subjects to cover, and we've been going for a little while already. So, um, one thing that I wanted to cover just briefly was a discussion that's kind of solar related. Matt's going down the rabbit hole as we speak, and
Oh,
Matt, you're in the process of getting all of your permanent equipment up and going, but at the moment you've got some temporary solutions in place. You want to tell us a little bit about the issue that you're facing at the moment?
oh yeah. So since the last time we did a live stream, I paid a small fortune and had someone come out and they put 42 panels on the house, right? And wired it all in, ran it through the attic, and then down uh, outside the house in conduit, metal conduit. Um, so I will mention that I'm going to be doing all the wiring myself and all the permitting myself. I have a background in computer slash electrical engineering. I've done a lot of wiring, the mining shed and all that. I did all the wiring for that. It's all the code. And I'll tell you what, the whole solar thing, it really is amazing how difficult it is to find the right materials and find stuff that is UL approved. Literally, the solar disconnects. I spent literally 2 weeks just trying to find the right stuff to buy that was UL approved. It is tremendously difficult. But that being said, I've got 2 strings of 9 panels each right now, just feeding an inverter that I have in the mining shed. It's totally off grid, so there's no problem with backfeeding. It's legal in that respect. Um, but yeah, so I'm powering, 2,000 watts worth of CPU power right now, completely off solar and off battery.
Nice. Well, you're having some issues also with your strings as far as getting full power out of two being paralleled. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Oh, well, it turns out that the panels will self-limit if you don't have the load there, which makes sense. The thing that was confusing me was I'm only charging the batteries at 800 watts. Why am I not charging the batteries higher? Something about my charge controller I'm still trying to work out. Why can I not charge over 800 watts? And that seems to be the sticking point, because I turned on another ASIC to pull some more power, and the panels instantly kicked in, and so I have the capacity that's there. I have the amperage that's there. I just it's all about loading up the couple of small circuits I have running off this one little single phase inverter. So it's fun to play with. I tell you that. I mean, I've got the EG4 inverter that's going to be mounted outside, and the Flex Boss that's going to be mounted outside. Um, So just waiting to submit my permit request, and then going to start running some conduit and start mounting some stuff.
Well, I found it incredibly intimidating before I started doing research. And I'm just curious, like from your perspective, now that you've gone down the rabbit hole, so to speak, is it as complicated as you thought it was going to be?
Being code compliant, it is.
Okay.
Just because you have to have like a DC disconnect, right? And so I've got 5 strings coming down from the roof, and it's like, okay, I'll just buy a 6 string disconnect. That's $500. It's $500. I'm not spending
Youch.
500. Yeah, I'm not spending $500 on a disconnect. And so the answer to that is you buy 3 4-wire, 4-wire disconnects, so that you can do that. And it's like now you gotta set them all out, mount each of them to the outside of your house and all this other stuff. And it's just like, how am I? I'm not doing anything crazy here. It's literally 5 strings. Like, why does this not exist? Why is this so expensive? And then the power company, for you to get an interconnect, requires you to have an air-gapped, AC disconnect. That's $400.
It's funny
$400
how expensive and complicated things get whenever Uncle Sam gets involved. Isn't that amazing?
Well, I get it. You don't want to kill anybody, alignment or anything like that. But my God, $400 for a switch?
Yeah, it's
My
crazy.
God. Yeah, but that's gotta be code compliant.
So Matthew Miller brings up something that was on the agenda that we talked about before we started streaming, and I was like, maybe we'll talk about it, maybe we won't. But I find it super interesting. He said he's seen some videos of people mining using solar directly from the panels, using a solar controller to output 12-volt DC rather than inverting to AC. It reduces losses and efficiency, and he is absolutely right. And Matt found something that's super interesting. Matt, you want to tell us what that was?
So I don't know. During the big Ethereum craze, I was ordering server power supplies, and by mistake I ordered some that were 48 volt. There was no AC. They were 48 volt. They were cheap. It was like $20 a piece or something like that. And I ordered it by mistake. But you can get the HP power supplies that are 48 volts. And you just need to run it off a 48 volt battery system, and you're set. So I know that Maskless Ninjas, I sent him a link, and he dove in like really hardcore. He's setting it up right now. But yeah, you can, run, your mining operation off of that and not have that power loss of going from, your batteries converting to AC and then going from AC to DC inside your server power supplies.
Now, these power supplies, not the DC ones, but an AC one, they obviously give you the ratings on them, and some of them are up to 95% efficient. So you're losing, in best case scenarios, maybe 5% efficiency converting from AC to DC. And in this case, you would essentially not have any loss there because you're going from DC to DC. But I am curious if, like, let's say, for example, you've got your panels wired in such a way and you're charging a 48 volt battery bank. What if you're sending 49 volts or 51 volts as opposed to 48 exactly? Are you going to see any issues with those power supplies, or is the battery bank going to be enough to kind of balance that load to where it doesn't see more than 48.5 volts or something?
Well, your batteries are going to have, it's just like your car battery, right? Like it has higher voltage, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the low end is 12 volts, right? Most of the time it's 13.8 volts. So the equipment will pull what it's going to pull as far as current goes. But as far as voltage, Like I think, like fully charged, a home battery is like 54 volts.
Something
There,
like
As
that. I
a,
forget, like
yeah, as I
54 or
recall.
52.
mhm. There are some server farms out there that run strictly on DC. Um,
Absolutely.
and from a business perspective, when you're integrating with the grid and you're participating with, uh, what do they call that when they want you to shut down? Um,
Load shedding.
Curtailment.
yeah, curtailment
Curtailment.
was the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. But when you're participating in that and you can store power, um, it makes total sense to run your whole farm in a DC application, right? And if they're doing it, it's obviously going to save them money. They're not doing it for no reason at all. And it's something that I want to explore further. I currently don't have a hybrid system, it's just strictly grid tie. And I'm fixing to buy a new inverter, but now I'm kind of like, man, do I buy another grid tie inverter or do I bite the bullet and spend the extra money so that I can start adding batteries? But then I look at the cost of batteries and I'm like, oh God, such a tough pill to swallow. Even when you find good deals,
Yeah.
um, they're still so expensive. My preference would just simply be to use the electric grid as my battery, essentially, if that makes sense.
Well,
Mhm.
you're in a unique situation where your warehouse isn't near your home,
Hmm.
so you could technically get a Nissan Leaf battery.
Yeah,
They're $1,000, dude,
it's
for
not
like
bad.
20 kilowatt hours, I think, for a
20?
thousand bucks.
How many amp
Okay.
hours is that?
I think it's something like 20 kilowatt hours. I have to look, and then of course they're going to be been degraded. But
It'd have to be way
um,
more than that. I'm looking at. I saw something the other day that was 314 amp hours, and they were like $380 for lithium batteries, which I thought was really good. You shared something with me a couple of months ago that was like 100 amp hours, and it was, I want to say it was 150 bucks, something like that. I think you were
These are the
really
rack mounted ones.
the ones that I was looking at are rack mountable. Yeah.
the first gen Nissan Leaf with the standard 24 kilowatt hour battery. Yeah, so the before 2018 is a 24 kilowatt hour battery. You could pick up for $1,000, I bet.
It seems low.
Yeah.
It
So
gets
Well,
confusing when we talk
but
about
wait.
amp hours versus kilowatt hours.
So it's
yeah,
24 kilowatt hours. So let's just say it's 20 because it's used, just for the fun of it. 20 divided by, because let's say you can get a 5 kilowatt hour battery now for $800. That's four. So four times, that's $3,200 worth of battery for $1,000.
It's not bad.
so
But
one
it
of the
doesn't have
things
a
that
BMS. Sorry.
that's okay. Um, One of the things that was brought up that was interesting are these 2-volt lithium ion phosphate prismatic cells that I was talking to a guy about, and those batteries are ridiculously cheap, and they don't believe they come with a BMC, so you gotta build your bus bars and then handle that separately. But apparently that is the absolute I don't want to say cheapest, but I guess that try to avoid that word because the extra connotations there. But apparently that is the way to go for getting the best bang for your buck on battery storage for solar. I need to dig into that more and see exactly how that runs.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that. Somebody mentioned earlier that they had a. Let's see if I can find it. I think it was Backwards Miner. He was talking about three phase and saying he just assumes that everything's going to be more expensive on three phase. I don't know if you have the option of going grid tie, but GrowWatt has a three phase. I want to say it's like 36 kilowatt inverter for like 3 grand. That if I had three phase, that's what I would be doing. That's super cost effective, but yeah.
So we were talking last night on Hawk's live show, whatever. And, a lot of people are like, oh, you can't do solar to run a whole place, doesn't have enough, doesn't have enough. And it's like, it's probably right. You can't run everything off battery and all that. But what solar does is if you have, say, 10-cent power, if you can get it down to 8-cent power, if you have 8-cent power, you can get your numbers down to 6-cent power. Now the opportunities for mining profitable really open up.
Yep.
And that's the way you have to look at it. It's not supposed to cover it all. It's supposed to take you down a bracket.
That's right. And when you can stay on when everybody else has to shut off, you are yielding way more coin.
Yes.
That worked out very well in my favor when Caspa came around for GPUs. Okay, so
Well, it's 3 o'clock here on the East Coast.
let's give the audience a chance to ask any questions that they have before we wrap up. And Chris, if you're still there, I wanted to bring you back into the conversation here. I'm curious, do you have a mining operation yourself? And if so, what do you got in your farm?
Hey, yeah, I do. Got a lot of GPUs sitting on a shelf collecting jet dust right now, but mainly focused on ASICs. I've got a lot hosted, to be honest with you. Hosted with a couple different companies. I've got about a hash and a half on BTC, about 100 gigahash script right now, and that's kind of been my focus. I want to start diving into more CPU stuff as we keep moving forward. Kind of expand there. I miss the hobbyist side of the things, the tinkering with things, GPU days, stuff like that. So I want to get back more into that.
Can I ask a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
So you're on script. What miners are you using with script? Because I've heard there's a lot of people are switching out from L7s to L9s, and they're thinking that the L9s are going to be way more life than, say, Bitcoin miners. What's your thought?
Yeah, so I've got L9s and I've got a few DG1s. That's my biggest thing right now. I've even thought about getting rid of some of the S19K Pros that I've got, things like that, and kind of moving back, shifting those funds into L9s just because they are so profitable. It's hard to say. I had a couple L7s, sold those, upgraded them to L9s. I mean, I do see, it really all depends on the hardware companies. I mean, how fast can they adapt? How fast can they keep adding, efficiencies to these miners? Is it going to be like Caspa, to where, one day 400 gigahash is insane, and then the next day they're, pumping out 12 terahash units, a month later?
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, really interested to see how that all plays out, from that aspect. If Bitmain drops an L12 tomorrow that's pushing 30 gigahash, does that affect the life cycle of the ones you're using today? So, interested to see there. I mean, I do. I do
Would
use
you
PowerPool
buy
and just convert.
would you buy an L7 for $3,000 right now?
That's been a hot topic on my head the last couple of days, to be honest with you. I saw Hawk's show the other day. He mentioned it. I've seen, Iowa Mining posted a couple the other day. I actually reached out to him. It's tough. I mean,
I don't think the numbers are there for it. I think it has to be less than 3,000. I think it has to be like 2,500 to even make sense.
Sorry, my headphones are cutting out there a little bit, but yeah, I mean, the cheaper the better. I think 3,000 is right there on that range, and then as profitability come up a little bit in the last few days with prices coming up, I've seen some crazy prices even on eBay, and some of the hosting companies listing used units getting a little bit higher, and I'm going, nah, you guys are getting a little crazy, but yeah, I think they've got to drop a little bit if you still want to get an L7. I mean, the DG ones I've got have been rock solid, and pricing's a little bit better, but
Yeah.
not quite as efficient as the L9, obviously.
So
Well,
when it
we'll
comes
just wait
to
for the next cycle.
hosting, obviously having a good relationship with the person that's hosting your equipment is super important. And I think the community has a pretty good mix of guys that are willing to host that are trustworthy. And I personally have been burned in the past. More so, a good friend of mine that was burned pretty good. And I have a terrible time of letting that equipment out of my sight, even if I do feel comfortable with the people that are hosting. I'm just curious, in your experience so far with the hosting that you have done, has it all been a positive experience, or can you share any things that kind of gave you pause and maybe second guess the decision?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got hosted with 3 different companies right now. I will say most of it's been pretty positive. One did throw out an odd curtailment kind of strategy without any sort of notice. Noticed the machine just being turned off for 8 hours a day. Shot them an email and they said, "Oh yeah, we've got curtailment for 3 months, and it's going to be off 8 hours a day for 3 months." And I said, "Excuse me, you didn't want to mention this to us?" "Oh well, by the way, but we can keep it turned on. It's just going to cost you more money, and we need you to agree to that for 3 months." I'm going, guys, I literally just signed up with you. This could have been mentioned up front. That was probably the kind of the shadiest instance I've had. The other 2 companies have been pretty rock solid. Great communication. Granted, I haven't recalled a miner from them, so I don't know what condition they're in, but they are running. So
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I've heard horror stories, but
yeah, I think it's important that we do have those discussions because let's be honest, not everybody's incentivized um, to share the downside risks of that. And from my personal experience, a good friend of mine who sent these ASICs off to get hosted, initially everything was going great, and then all of a sudden one goes down, and getting in touch with these people starts to progressively get harder and harder and harder, and then it turned into, okay, now 3 of them are down, and it's like, well, this one's going to need a new board, and you're going to have to send it back to Bitmain, and we can facilitate that process, but it's going to cost you extra. He's like, okay, well, I got to do what I got to do, and then it doesn't get shipped, and then it gets shipped, but they don't tell him, it's like $800 for uh, tariff fees, and then it's another $800 to send it back, and then they just get to a point where they're like, okay, well, we got bought out, so things are changing, and then next thing you know, only 1 out of 8 machines is running. They don't respond, and then after threatening litigation, it's like, well, look, here's the deal. Like, we don't typically deal with small clients. We usually deal with people who are hosting hundreds of devices with us, and if we're being honest, yours is really more of a headache than it's worth, so we're just going to give them back to you. And then a couple months goes by, and it's like, he hasn't received anything, they're not responding, and he reaches out to other people that are hosting with them, and the next thing you know, they're not responding to anybody. They just disappeared from the face of the earth with thousands of people's of equipment. So,
Gee.
that's probably like worst case scenario, and I wouldn't expect something like that to happen with a lot of the guys that are in this industry and active in the community. But you just really have to consider all possibilities before you part ways with that hardware, especially when we're talking about the price tags that we're talking about. These aren't a $600 GPU. We're talking about a $3,000 to $10,000 ASIC, and certainly not a risk that I
100%.
personally can take. So
No, and I don't like it. And coming from it, being a business person and looking at it from that perspective, that's been my biggest fear. Is and you call an insurance company, and it's almost impossible to get them insured, because you don't physically have them in your facility. That's one of the biggest things that's always kind of held me back is, what happens, the hosting company's insured, but your equipment isn't personally insured to you. So if a tornado comes through, wipes that facility out, what do? You just throw your hands in the air? So yeah, I mean, the risks are real, and I mean, it's definitely something to consider. And I'm with you guys. I'd much rather have my hands on it, and be able to prepare it if needed myself than have to trust somebody else with it. But it just doesn't, unfortunately, work out for everybody to do
Mhm.
so.
yeah. All right, guys. Well, it is. We're going on quite a while now. I think we've been going close to 2 hours at this point. So probably time to get back to the family and enjoy the rest of the Sunday. Take care of some honeydew stuff. Chris, before we get out of here, do you want to share where everybody can find you? That way we get some awareness about the publication.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Follow us on Twitter, or X, sorry. Didn't throw that out there, but yeah, and then check out the website cryptominingmag.com. Subscribe. The first issue is going to be coming out in September, so we got some exciting things coming, some partnerships. You'll see a lot more of us on YouTube, and definitely X probably the easiest place to get up to date updates. But yeah, check out the website, follow us. We're doing some minor giveaways, some cool stuff coming. So we will be at Mining Disrupt in November. So love to meet everybody in person. Yeah, feel free to shoot us a note and reach out anytime.
Appreciate it. And speaking of giveaways, I won your giveaway, which was a complete shock to me because I never win anything. I probably should have played the lottery that day, but you've got an AL0 coming my way, and I'm excited about getting that thing.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and
Nice.
Yeah, happy to see you guys get that. Yeah, let me know how it works out for you.
I sure will. Matt, thank you for joining us. Tactical, thank you for being here, sir. You carried the conversation for a pretty significant portion of the show, man, and I really appreciate you being here and stepping up, guys.
Of course.
If there's anything else, anybody want to add anything before we get out of here?
Have a great week, everyone, and don't take it too serious.
Yeah, hit that like button on the way out. We will see
There you
you
go.
next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.